Neil Roberts.
My book, Lucid Dreamer, is non-fiction, at least mostly. It's a biography of the poet Peter Redgrove, who died in 2003. I'd like to spend a long time talking about the wonderful poet Peter Redgrove is, but I don't have time. But anyway, if you don't buy my biography, then buy Peter Redgrove's poems. Like many writers, Redgrove was haunted by his childhood. His published writings about his childhood often read like parodies of the Oedipal scenario. Once in bed at 10, cuddling with mother, he waved a wand in his voice, and I got out of the silken double cabinet forever. There's nothing unusual about a small boy liking to cuddle with his mother in bed, or about the father deciding that this has to stop at a certain age. The Oedipal scenario of rivalry with the father, superseded by identification, would not have passed into popular currency if it weren't recognised from common experience. But Peter was never able to identify with his father. The most obvious reasons for conflict between father and son were typical of their class and period, not inevitably the source of lasting trouble. His father, Jim, was materially successful, socially conventional, rigidly masculine, domineering, and not given to introspection. This triangle is so important, Peter records him saying, pointing to his collar, tie, and the V of his waistcoat. He was also jovial, generous, entertaining, and fond of games. His grandchildren were to adore him. Such a character is more difficult for a sensitive and imaginative son to deal with, especially when paired with, in Peter's own words, an imaginative, poetic, and very feminine mother. Jim made Peter feel small and insecure, whereas his mother Nan nurtured his sensitivity. The contrast between them was exaggerated by their son's highly developed sensory awareness. Compared to Nan's complex of soft touch and sweet smells, he is repelled by his father's rutting smells in the communal bowl. Even in his 50s, on the occasion of Jim's last visit to him, years after Nan's death, Peter was convinced that the smells and electricity off this bull of a man were the source of his lifelong obsessions and impressions. But the sexually stereotyped contrast between his parents, even with his heightened sensitivity to it, is unlikely of itself to have created these conflicts and obsessions that were persistently the haunt that inspired him. Home movies of conventional middle-class fun and family fondness conceal a much darker picture, of which Peter is the main witness. He has spoken of his mother taking lovers to open her womb because she and Jim were having difficulty conceiving. She told him of a sinister male lover who seemed to be a magician. He became preoccupied with the idea that she joined a magic circle, that this lover was the notorious magician Aleister Crowley, and prompted by a physical resemblance, that Crowley might have been his real father. The idea of committing adultery to open the womb is bizarre, and may be part of Peter's attempt to reconcile himself emotionally to the fact that his mother certainly did have lovers, both before and after he was born. He recalls his mother like a whore with a builder who gave him money, and another man who jumped out of the bedroom window onto the veranda roof as Jim came home unexpectedly. The idea that Nan's adulteries were motivated by the desire to conceive by Jim is hard to reconcile with the fact that she periodically had abortions, which were for Peter a symbol of his parents' embattled love life. His memoir, which he wrote in the late 90s, is prefaced by the question, how is a person to decide if they were sexually abused as a child? His speculations about this range widely, from excessive physical intimacy with his mother to the possibility that he, and also his younger brother David, was damaged in the womb by attempted abortion. He believed that his aborted siblings were buried in the family garden. There is even a hint in his journal, written many years later, that she made him complicit in termination. For Peter, the house had two conflicting atmospheres, emanating from what he thought of as his parents' respective rooms. The odorous kitchen, and through a dark hall, the lounge where his father sat, his bald head shining, while he worked through his papers. I vividly remember changing personalities as I crossed from one room to another. Failing to make his parents conform to his ideal of harmony, he felt that he had to choose between them. Inevitably, he chose his mother. His reflections on his childhood hover around the troubling question whether their closeness was incestuous. Does the mother abuse her child by dressing him lovingly for school? Was I sexually abused by the passionate administrations of parents? However, the most decisive aspect of Peter's relationship with his mother was that when he was 10 or 12 years old, she made him the confidant of her sexual dissatisfaction and rebellions. She told him that she did not desire Jim, though he was a good and dear man, that she had married him for security. She also burdened him with the knowledge of her affairs and abortion. He believed that Jim was so virile a man obsessed with manliness that he created by electrical induction of feminine identification in almost anybody he met. But in himself, the feminine identification must have been just as strongly encouraged by Nan, enlisting him as an ally in the marital war, so that he might learn as a boy something of the truth of womanhood, and telling him that he was much preferable in so many ways to his father. A hearty, rigid, outwardly successful and socially conventional man such as Jim would present problems for any sensitive son. But when, as Jim did, the father truly loved his son, those problems would eventually be negotiated. Nan's revelations made Jim's assertiveness not just a burden, but a sham. Peter's feminine identification went unchallenged, and he was never able to accept his father's love.